I never had any power over you. مَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُم مِّن سُلْطَانٍ إِلَّا أَن دَعَوْتُكُمْ. All I could do was invite you. That's the only thing I could do. I had the power to invite you. فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. And you responded to me. You responded to me. فَلَا تَلُومُونِي. Then don't blame me. وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Blame yourselves. Why are you blaming me for? He says, مَا أَنَا بِمُصْرِخِكُمْ وَأَمَا أَنْتُمْ بِمُصْرِخِيَّ. I'm not going to be yelling at you today. I'm not going to get mad at you about nothing. And I don't think you should be mad at me about anything. We're all just let's just live the barbecue together now. It is what it is. Okay? إِنِّي كَفَرْتُ بِمَا أَشْرَكْتُمُونِي مِنْ قَبْلِ. I deny all the ways in which you made me divine before. You made me a partner to Allah before. All the devil worship you did. All the sanctimony you did. All the loyalty you showed me. I deny, reject all of it. إِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. The fact of the matter is, it's always been true, people who do wrong are going to get painful punishment. That's the devil talking in the Quran on Judgment Day. Letting us know where humanity stands in the end. This is now being compared to munafiqun. You would think in Surah Al-Hashr that Allah will talk about the Jewish tribes and their treachery, right? Which He does. But actually far more intense a criticism in these ayat is not of the Jewish tribes, but it's actually of the munafiqun. And what's even more remarkable is one of the spiritual climaxes of the Quran, the highest spiritual place in the Quran, of our relationship with Allah and our relationship with the word of Allah is right in the following ayat. In the following ayat. You see, for example, Allah will say in the next parable, لَوْ أَنزَلْنَا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ عَلَى جَبَلٍ. If we sent this Qur'an on a mountain. The parable of the Qur'an coming down is in this surah, a few ayat later. And then a place where more of Allah's names are mentioned together than any other place in the entire Qur'an is here. هُوَ اللَّهُ الَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ عَالِمُ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ هُوَ الرَّحْمَنُ الرَّحِيمُ هُوَ اللَّهُ الَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. I would say this is like the Iman climax. One of the highest places in the Quran. And look at the wisdom of Allah. Allah put the people of the lowest, worst, furthest distance from Allah, the munafiqun that are compared to Iblis himself. And after that He mentioned the highest state of Iman that we're supposed to have. The two extreme contrasts placed right next to each other at the end of this surah. The ebb and the flow. The yin and the yang kind of, the opposites placed together, subhanAllah. And so now as we end this, I want to share with you what Allah says about the conclusion to all of this. فَكَانَ عَاقِبَتَهُمَا أَنَّهُمَا فِي النَّارِ خَالِدَيْنِ فِيهَا. What was the outcome for both the devil and the people who listened to the devil? Both of them, there's no outcome in the end except that both of them are going to end up in the fire in which they will remain. By this parable, what is Allah saying about the Yahud tribes that were treacherous against the Prophet ﷺ and the munafiqun that were aiding them? Both in trouble. وَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ الظَّالِمِينَ. And that is the payback for all who do wrong. All and everyone who does wrong. This lecture can easily be misunderstood because I don't think Muslims pay a lot of attention to what hypocrisy is, what nifaq is. And it's a very scary and very sensitive subject, but we use it very loosely. We use the term very loosely. And it's very dangerous to use a term like that loosely because you're talking about the people, arguably there's nobody worse in the Quran than these people, right? So then throwing that label around or using that label loosely is a pretty dangerous thing to do. So a few just qualifiers that aren't related to this parable, but I do want you to understand because now hopefully by this parable you understand the seriousness. A munafiq is so bad, he's comparable to the devil himself. Right? And the kafir is at least straightforward about him being misled. The munafiq is duplicitous. He can't be trusted, has no loyalties, is not loyal to anybody. And I showed you some of the qualities of the munafiqun. The challenge is this. And inshallah, those of you that are interested, I did a deep dive on hypocrisy itself in Surah Al-Munafiqun. My series on Surah Al-Munafiqun, I did a lot of work on how to understand hypocrisy. But I want to give you some basics that you walk away with in today's dars. There are two kinds of nifaq in the Quran. There's two kinds of hypocrisy. And one of the easiest ways you can separate the two is there's conscious hypocrisy and there's subconscious hypocrisy. Deliberate and non-deliberate. Let me just explain what I mean by that. Other scholars, classical scholars, had a more difficult to understand term. They would say nifaq fil aqidah, nifaq fil amal. But I'm using different terms to say the same thing, because I want this to be easier for you to grasp. Okay. There are people who became Muslim who had no intention or interest in Islam. Their only reason for becoming Muslim is because Islam is a growing power. I'm going to join the stock is going up, might as well buy into this stock. Right? And if things go south, I can always sell my stock and go the other way. Right? So وَقَدْ دَخَلُوا بِالْكُفْرِ وَهُمْ قَدْ خَرَجُوا بِهِ. They came with kufr to begin with, and they're going to leave with kufr. They never had an ounce of iman to begin with. Right? They never had the right intention for believing. So they're basically like spies. They're basically like, it's a form of espionage. And Allah will tell us that actually some of the tribes, the Jewish tribes, they wanted to undermine the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the ways to undermine him, because the Jews were known as people of literature and knowledge and rabbis and things like that. They're knowledgeable people, right? And now a man is coming and claiming to be a prophet. What's the best way to sort of undermine him? What's the best way to discredit him? They would send some of their students and tell them, go pretend to take shahada and go join Islam. Go join Islam. Sit with the Prophet for a whole day, and then by nighttime say, I spent a whole day with him, and given that I have, my ijazah in Torah, and I've got, I studied under Shaykh this, based on the knowledge that I have, that's not a prophet. Right? Aminu billadhi, what is it? Let me pull up the ayah. My hifz is getting weak now. آمنوا بالذي أنزل على الذين آمنوا وجه النهار واكفروا آخره لعلهم يرجعون. Right? Believe in what's been revealed to those who actually believe during the day. And by the end of it, become kuffar again. Why? Because then some of them will also leave. Why? Because a lot of the Arabs were not very educated. So when they see an educated, scholarly rabbi type come and join Islam, they're like, wow, even the scholars joining Islam. And then the scholar's like, yeah, I made a mistake. I spent the whole day with them. It's not nothing really here. I'm out. So they're like, well, if he took a closer look and he left, then maybe I'm just not that educated. I should leave too. So they were hoping they could take credibility away from the Prophet ﷺ by doing that. But the people who entered into the religion for that purpose, did they enter sincerely? No, it's obvious. They entered for espionage. They entered to create corruption, to create a problem for the Muslims. But then there's a second kind of munafiq. There's a second kind. And the second kind of munafiq is a scary kind. The first one, Allah will deal with them. And many of the places in the Quran, Allah is talking about that kind. Because they're making schemes with the enemy. They're making power moves, right? So you could tell they have no loyalty to Islam itself. But there's another kind of nifaq. And the other kind of nifaq is somebody joined Islam for the right reasons. Then they realized, this is too much to ask. I gotta go to war? Well, I gotta leave my home? Well, you want me to spend how much now? So I didn't know. I was a good religion. I like how the Quran sounds and stuff, but these demands are, it's quite a bit to ask. And I can't be friends with these people or those people anymore, and I become Muslim. All these people are going to become my enemy. I don't know. Can we have like a lighter Islam? Can we have like a little bit more like something a little more progressive, something more like, we can fit it in our context a little bit. Why do we have to be so tough? And I don't know, the Prophet keeps talking about, is there a surah that's telling us to go to war? لَوْلَا نُزِلَتْ سُورَةٌ. Why is he telling us to go to war? Did a surah come down telling us to go to war? Like they're starting to have a problem with some of the revelations. They're not sitting well with them, right? But they're not disturbed enough to leave the religion, but they're not at peace with what's coming. They're disturbed by what's coming. And so they're la ilaha ula wa la ilaha ula. They're not quite here, they're not quite there. They're oscillating. مُذَبْذَبِينَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ. They're caught between the two sides. The careful thing to study in the Quran is sometimes Allah is talking about the deliberate munafiq, the conscious munafiq. These people, they're struggling with their faith, And they're starting to pull back, and they're starting to exhibit signs of hypocrisy in different degrees. And now they're starting to cut corners and maybe find a way to, not be too loyal to Islam, or even be partially loyal to Islam, etc. That's another kind of nifaq that Allah talks about in the Quran. These are two different kinds of nifaq. The scary thing is, Allah did not say, I'm talking about nifaq category A over here, and I'm talking about nifaq category B over here. He's just talking about nifaq straight up and saying, for example, the hypocrites are in the lowest pit of the hellfire. So anybody afraid of it is going to think, well, that's talking about me. And that's by design. Allah wants the believer to be worried that they might fall under the second category. Believers aren't in the first category. We are Muslim because we believe in Islam. We are not in danger of the first category. We are in danger of the second category. And the second category can only be recognized by myself internally. Somebody else cannot recognize me. I want you to understand this last portion too. When someone disobeys Allah, they don't become a munafiq. They don't become a munafiq. They committed an act of isyan. They did a disobedience. They made a mistake. They did a sin. And it can make it can corrupt their heart to some extent, put a blemish on their heart, and they can make tawbah and they can remove that blemish. But a sin does not make you a munafiq. A sin does not make you a munafiq. Continuous sin, and then eventually justifying the sin, and then saying, why is this a sin anyway? What's the big problem with it? I don't know. This doesn't seem like it's such a bad thing. Now you're trying to bend the religion to your preferences without quite, you're not leaving the religion, you're not walking away from the religion, you're making the religion bend the way you bend. Now we're starting to trend towards what? The munafiq side. Right? There's a difference between someone who says, I should pray, I'm just lazy, I don't get up in the morning, I need to work on myself. Right? I need to work on myself. Sinful, in danger of hypocrisy, but not hypocrite yet. And somebody says, yeah, I don't wake up, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? It's not like you're going to go to Jahannam for that. It's fine. It's not that bad. In fact, you should relax too. You had a long week. Right? Now we're treading towards nifaq. But that's something you have to judge for yourself, I have to judge for myself. That's why Allah did not address the Muslims. Even when Allah was talking to the hypocrites, Allah used Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. Those of you who what? Believe. Allah never used Ya ayyuhal ladhina nafaqu. Those of you who are hypocrites. He didn't say that. Even when he was talking about hypocrisy, when he was saying, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. Those of you who believe, why do you say what you don't do? When there's a contradiction between your speech and your actions, isn't that hypocrisy? Classic definition. Why begin with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu? Because Allah is teaching us a profound lesson. This is a disease of the heart, which means only Allah knows who has it. On the outside, a sinner and a hypocrite may do the same thing. On the outside, in fact, the righteous person and the hypocrite may do the same thing. Abdullah ibn Ubay used to be at Fajr every morning. He was more regular than most of us. Right? So how are you going to tell that that's hypocrisy? Right? So there's no way to tell what's going on inside the heart. So we as a people need to call out sin. We need to call out behavior. But when we start calling people munafiq, and we start labeling people that way, or thinking about people that way, that I think is a disease by itself. That's actually a pretty serious sickness by itself. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us from falling into this deep down trap, and may Allah Azza wa Jal keep us from being people that don't have any loyalty towards anyone, right? Because this is actually in the end the worst thing of a munafiq, because they're two-faced. They don't trust anyone, and therefore nobody can trust them. So even their enemies the enemies of Islam aren't their friend, the Muslims aren't their friend. They think they have a backup plan everywhere. Allah is saying you're cut off from everywhere. You're completely cut off from every direction. May Allah not make us of those and keep our alliances where they're supposed to be. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikr al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.